Paths to the Present has been presenting links to the past since the year 2000. Over the years, we've worked hard to present stories about Montgomery County's rich history. And you know, some of those are worth seeing again. We've combed our archives for segments to repackage for you today. So sit back, relax while we rewind. Hi, I'm Gail Street. This rewind explores two very different stories from Montgomery County's past. The first was produced in 2002 and visits the Rockville Cemetery, one of the oldest cemeteries in the country. Today, it has grown to 28 acres and serves the community. Fifth-generation Rockvillian Dr. Stephen Cromwell is the president of the management group, Rockville Cemetery Association, Incorporated.
Well, this land was donated to the Anglican Church by Thomas Williams, who lived in the area and donated 2 acres of land to the Anglican Church for the building of a church. A small chapel of ease made of log and clapboard was built in 1739. It was enlarged in 1750 and again in 1755 as the number of parishioners increased in numbers. And by that time, people began to be buried around the church, as was typical with the Anglican Church in that time.
After the Revolution, Anglican churches became Episcopal. In 1822, this congregation moved to Washington Street, where they still worship today.
The Episcopal Church continued to use this as a burial ground for its parishioners. Other people from other denominations might be buried here with the approval of the rector and at least 2 of the vestrymen, but it was primarily an Episcopal cemetery. In 1880, however, the vestry decided to offer this as a community cemetery, and there were representatives from a number of denominations: the Methodists, the Presbyterians, the Episcopalians, the Baptists, and the Christians Church all sent representatives and to be on the executive committee and to take over the responsibility of maintaining the cemetery. That's how the name the Rockville Union Cemetery got started. It was never really the official name of the cemetery, but that's what it's been known as for many, many years.
The first president of the association helped to enlarge the grounds.
Judge Bowie lived over here at Glenview Mansion, which is adjacent to the Rockville Cemetery, and he provided an additional 5 acres of land to expand the cemetery area. And at the death of his wife, Catherine, in 1894, an additional 2 acres were offered there to further increase the area, which we now know as the upper part of the cemetery.
Since then, through various acquisitions, the cemetery expanded to its current size of 28 acres. There are simple stones, elaborate obelisks, as well as enormous mausoleums. Despite its recent growth, the cemetery still feels very historic.
Well, this is the gravestone of John Harding. John Harding was a farmer who lived up county and was a member of the vestry. When he died in 1752, he was buried here, and this is the oldest stone that we know of in the Rockville Cemetery. A couple of things of interest are the inscriptions on here. You'll notice that there is a skull and crossbone and an hourglass, and that was fairly typical of that period of time to have that kind of identification on tombstones.
Strolling among the headstones, one is struck by the familiar names. There's Poole, Claggett, Allnut, Prettyman, and Bell.
Upton Bell was the second clerk of the circuit court. The first clerk of the circuit court was his father, and they lived in Georgetown. And when his father passed away, he became the second clerk of the court. The community decided it was such an important role that he needed to move out into Montgomery County, and he built a house on West Montgomery Avenue, which we know now as the Bell Dawson House, and is now the home of the Montgomery Historical Society. He was very prominent in the community and remained as the clerk of the court until 1823 when he passed away.
Up the hill, one finds the Stone Street family site.
Dr. Stonestreet is buried here along with many members of his family. Dr. Stonestreet was born here in Rockville. After attending medical school at the University of Maryland, he started practicing here in 1853, and he practiced here for 50 years and passed away in 1903. He became one of the most prominent physicians in town and treated individuals there for over 50 years, was beloved by everybody, and was actually probably one of the most prominent citizens in the town, was also a member of the original Cemetery Association when it was established in 1880.
Under a tree in a rather inconspicuous spot is the grave of Walter Johnson.
Walter Johnson was born in Kansas in 1897. He's better known as the Big Train because he pitched baseball here for the Washington Senators in the 1920s and was largely responsible for them winning the American League Championship several years running. After he retired from baseball, he became a county commissioner and lived on a farm in Upper Montgomery County.
The Bullard family is in this section.
The Bullards established Chestnut Lodge Sanitarium. Originally, this had been a woodland hotel, and it was closed in, I think, 1904. And Dr. Ernest Bullard, who was a physician from Milwaukee, bought the property and he turned it into a psychiatric institute. His son, Dexter Bullard, took over as a young psychiatric physician and made it one of the most outstanding psychiatric hospitals in the United States.
And a site that is very dear to Dr. Cromwell is that of the Veers family.
I'm a descendant from Miss Rebecca T. Veers. The Veers owned a farm out on Route 28 where now Lakewood Country Club is. Miss Rebecca was very active with the Cemetery Association, and in 1894 she and Mrs. Holland and Mrs. Offutt formed the Women's Executive Committee, and they came out here with the house servants and gardeners from the citizens of Rockville, and they cleared this land, which had been badly overgrown over the years, and restored it to a condition that the newspaper said was a place of serenity and beauty.
Currently, only about 50% of the available land is being used for burial sites. Rockville Cemetery Association Incorporated is dedicated to the preservation of the old while ensuring that there is room for the future.
This is a community cemetery, and our goal is to make it as attractive as possible, to restore the stones, to care for the roads that are in some disrepair. This is now a historic site, and we want to do our best to make it a place that the community can be proud of and that we can look forward to the use for another 100 years or so.
Our next segment comes from 2003 and features what's known today as the David Taylor Naval Surface Warfare Center near Carderock. This premier naval facility is where scale models of Navy ships are tested before they're built. A young naval officer came up with this idea in the late 1800s. The David Taylor Model Basin is actually the second such testing site built by the U.S. Navy. The first one was built in 1896 at a cost of $100,000. A young naval constructor, David W. Taylor, is the brilliant visionary behind this first experimental model basin. Tom Waring, press spokesperson for Carderock, explains.
It was his character, personality, and perseverance, and brilliance, in my opinion, that enabled him to persuade senior naval officers, admirals, and other folks, political appointees, and eventually Congress, that they would give him the money to personally design and build the original experimental model basin, which was located at the Washington, D.C. Navy Yard.
This first basin was 470 feet long. David Taylor designed it and oversaw its construction. Once completed, Rear Admiral Taylor supervised the facility until his retirement in 1923. During that time, more than 1,000 naval designs were developed and tested. But by 1929, the Navy Yard facility became inadequate in size and structural design. So the search was on to find a new site. Dana Wagner, curator of Navy Museum models, tells what they were looking for.
They examined over 20 plots of land, generally in the Washington area. They settled on what was originally 107 acres out here in Carderock. The place was specifically of interest to the Navy because of its geological formations. The bedrock here is very close to the surface of the earth. And bedrock was what they wanted to build the new model basin upon so that it would never change. And as I understand it, it actually has not.
In 1936, the land sold for $60,000. And in the midst of the Great Depression, a 1,200-foot concrete and steel tow tank, as well as 3 administrative buildings, were constructed. It is said that Congress appropriated the funds because the facility was to be named after Admiral Taylor. David Taylor never worked here. He suffered a serious stroke by that time. However, he was present at the dedication.
In November of 1939, the building was just about complete. It was close enough, and they had a scare that they believed Admiral Taylor was going to die, so they hurried up and they had a dedication out here and brought him out in a wheelchair in November of 1939, and he was able to see the place, probably the one and only time he ever saw it, and he died 8 months later.
The first tests were conducted here only 2 weeks prior to the start of World War II. That resulted in a flurry of design and testing activities.
Well, the Navy, from the beginning, tested all of its ships here during World War II, so they were responsible for the new designs during the war. They did a lot of work on landing ships, which were particularly important during the war, especially considering that they intended to invade Japan. So there's a lot of quick, intensive work done on landing ships, landing craft. There was a new type of ship design during the war, all intended for basically one-time use, which was the big invasion of Japan. That was all done here.
Over the years, this facility has grown in leaps and bounds. The original basin was extended to 3,000 feet in 1946. More state-of-the-art testing sites were added on the land surrounding the basin. The facility's name has changed several times. However, the original model basin still retains the name David Taylor. Model testing is still an essential component of naval development. Today, the models correct, confirm, and improve on contemporary computer designs.
I believe that this organization contains an essential characteristic of carefully moving into the future without making expensive mistakes. Our function is to help chart a safe course into the future for the Navy and other paying sponsors. And we provide objective analysis, not fraught with political overtones. When we provide our results, we're not worried that somebody might not like them or might like them too much. So we provide an objective reference for any concept that is within our mission to perform.
Well, that's it for now. I'm Gail Street. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.